Welcome to Neogenesis Nutrition, your place for a new beginning, where health is not just a destination, but a profound and transformative odyssey. Hello, I'm Dr. Jennifer Champion, Doctor of Clinical Nutrition, board-certified hypnotherapist, author, and a general badass. With a relentless dedication to challenging the status quo and pushing the boundaries of conventional medical wisdom, I have earned a reputation as a fearless pioneer in the functional nutrition world. Developed out of grief and armed with a deep-rooted passion for uncovering the underlying causes of disease and dysfunction, I embarked on a journey of discovery that led me far beyond the confines of traditional medical and nutrition education. I refused to accept the limitations of mainstream approaches and instead delved into the realms of alternative therapies, functional medicine, and cutting-edge nutritional science. All right, welcome back, listeners, to the Neogenesis Nutrition Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Jennifer Champion, and today I am with Dr. Cathy Burns and Kaitlyn Ege, who is a registered dietitian, joining us all the way from Norway, and Dr. Cathy is joining us from the East Coast over in Massachusetts. And I really wanted to bring these two on because they work in an area of nutrition that I will not touch ever. Mostly that kidney health category, but they also specialize in chronic disease, which we have seen such an increase in, especially here in the US. Since I was a kid, and I won't let you do the math, so I'm not going to tell you how long ago that is, but you can take a wild guess at how many years ago that was. So welcome, ladies. I'm so glad to have you. I'm going to let you each introduce yourselves, how you got into the field of nutrition, and maybe touch a little bit about your passion. So I'm going to start with Dr. Cathy. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners and what you're most passionate about.
Good afternoon. It is afternoon. I got into this field. I started out as a chef. I actually was formally trained. I had my degree in culinary arts, food service management. I found myself working in a hospital, and I realized the relationship between food and disease early on, which brought me to go back to school and become a registered dietitian, and then I just kept going on and on and on because it was a passion of mine to just keep learning more and more about how I could help, get to the root cause of chronic disease. And I ended up working in dialysis clinics and found that I could really make a difference there. So I felt that I really wanted my practice to focus on that. So that's kind of my story. I started out as a foodie and ended up as a clinical dietitian and a doctor of nutrition.
That's awesome, and I bet the food in your house is amazing.
Yeah.
And Kaitlyn, how about you? How did you get into the field and the world of food and nutrition?
Hello, thank you for having us. So my story is a little different. I think all of us as dietitians have a little bit of a different entry gateway. Most people I find don't really know right off the bat that they want to be a dietitian. They kind of just end up there one way or another. But in contrast, I kind of knew right going into college that this was what I wanted to do. And I think that was actually heavily influenced by Cathy because I watched her go through her master's program, her doctorate program, and I actually found it very interesting. I knew definitely early on I wanted to go into medicine, but I had always bounced around between specialties, and I always had a love for food. So then when I found out that you could be a dietitian and mix medicine and health with the food, it kind of seemed like the perfect fit. So then I ended up going to school and I got my master's degree, and I've been practicing now for almost 3 years. So I'm still very new in this, but so far I really love it, and I think that I've made a really good choice. I love working with people and talking about food and finding new recipes to cook and talking about that too. So it's just a very, very good fit.
Awesome. Awesome. I know whenever I'm looking through my database of recipes, it's like I instantly become hungry. And I could have just eaten, but I'm looking at all these these recipes and I'm going, oh, the occupational hazard. Do you either one of you ever run into that same situation where you have a client that is like, I really am struggling with how to put what your recommendations are on my plate? Could you give me some recipes? Do you guys ever do that too, where you're just like, oh wow, that looks good, or I need to make that. Oh, I wonder if that would pair with that.
Um, Caitlin, you want to answer that? I think we
I
both have
think
different. Go ahead.
I think that we definitely play a big role in helping people find new recipes. We both are definitely foodies. Of course, I'm not a classically trained chef, so my abilities are not like superior. So I can probably relate more to like the layman, the person that's just trying to like put something together. I push for a lot of like one pot recipes because I find that it's really easy for people to kind of do on their own. And there's less dishes, it's less work, everything kind of just gets dumped into one pot and go. So I also like to take into account people's different dietary restrictions, if they're following maybe like a vegetarian diet, if they're vegan, if they have food allergies. And then based off of all of that information, I go through like a mental list in my head. Okay, like what do I think that you would like? And then we kind of talk about that. And then one of the other tactics that I think is really helpful when we're meeting with people is to not only tell them what you would like, but also to really dive into that conversation. And a lot of times people start coming up with ideas of foods that they generally like. And then I like to take those meals that they like, modify them so that they fit into this new diet. So say someone was recently diagnosed with kidney disease and they have like a favorite food, but
Yeah.
maybe at its base, that food doesn't fit into a kidney friendly diet. Well,
Hmm.
we can probably make it fit. So I really like to do that. So that way it helps keep some of the consistency that people have had their whole lives. So they don't get diagnosed with something or have to change their
Yeah.
diet and then feel like they need to do a whole 180 in their life. We kind of keep things as consistent as we can. And people tend to respond really well to that because they don't feel like they're giving up their favorite foods.
That's
Yes, I agree.
huge.
Yes, modification. So if we get clients, they've been eating this way sometimes for 50, 60 years. And most of the time they feel, because we don't call it a diet, first of all, we just make it a lifestyle change. We just try to introduce foods that they can accept. We don't make it about telling them. We make it part of what they tell us. The information they give us, we develop a plan that we feel can work for them to succeed, and we go slow. I always say we walk before we run. So we take little steps so that we feel that we're making small, steady goals instead of just saying, here it is, here's a diet. And they go home and they're like, and they just put it on the table and walk away and open the fridge and go back into what they're comfortable with. So we try to keep their comfort foods, but modify them by recipe, by portion size, or even by frequency to make sure that they still feel that they can, it's about having quality of life.
Hmm.
We want to continue with their quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that I run into a lot is this almost defeated feeling when somebody walks in after receiving a major diagnosis, right? That, oh, you're going to have to change everything. And I have to say goodbye to everything that I've ever loved in terms of food. And when I tell my clients, look, yeah, we're going to have to let go of some things, as in the case of like celiac. You eat gluten and it's not going to be good for you. It's going to cause more harm for you in the long run. However, there's workarounds that we can do. So I love that you also, both of you, are on the same page and look for ways to take what they already love so that it becomes doable, it becomes manageable, as opposed to that overly restrictive mindset that the four-letter word diet creates in our brain.
Yeah.
Um, So I'd like to kind of jump to the kidney stuff because, like I told the listeners early on, I won't touch this. And we get calls here at my clinic for it, but I refer them out. I refer them over to you, or I refer them up to a registered dietitian here locally if they want to work with somebody in person. What are some of the early signs of kidney dysfunction that people often overlook?
Well, I can start by saying that, just to go over the statistics, there's 35.5 million people that have CKD in the world. It's 9 in 10 adults with CKD don't even know they have it. And
Wow.
there's 1 in 3 with severe, like stage 3 or 4 CKD, don't know they have it. So it's one of the diseases that sometimes, until your kidneys are almost failing, almost ready for dialysis, that the patients aren't told that they have chronic kidney disease. So I think that people need to be proactive and ask for their blood work. And if they're not able to read it, if there's something that's abnormal, ask what this means. What does that mean for me? So that they can start early on. The early on that you start, treating this disease, the better the outcomes. So some of the signs are silent. Some of them are, they protein in the urine, and sometimes you'll see like foamy urine. If you get like almost like foam when you urinate, that's one of the signs. But mostly, there really aren't too many signs. If you have hypertension, diabetes, then those directly impact the kidneys. So a lot of the chronic diseases that you have, like congestive heart failure, coronary artery disease, the medications also that you take can also impact the kidneys. There's some that are renal toxic, antibiotics that are renal toxic, chemotherapy drugs that are renal toxic. So there's so many instances that the kidney can be impaired, because the kidney is it's your filter. Your body's getting rid of waste. So when it becomes overloaded in text, it begins to fail. And so, but the numbers like your creatinine and your blood urea nitrogen are some of the labs that will start to show abnormalities. And sometimes the doctors will let the clients know, and sometimes not. This is why I always advocate for people to get a copy of their blood work. Even if they can't read it, they can see, something that's not out of range and ask the questions.
Excellent. Kaitlyn, is there anything else that you want to add to that?
I think she kind of summarized it pretty well. And it's very true. I will say that the majority of clients that we see or that I come across that have kidney disease have a very similar story where they're in stage 3 or stage 4 and they come in and they're frustrated because they didn't know that they had kidney disease. And they're like, okay, well, if now we're looking back at these labs and they've been abnormal for like 4, 5, 6 years, why didn't I know? Why did no one tell me? And it's a story that we hear a lot, and it's really sad. And one of the things that we do push for is patient advocacy and really kind of getting those labs, reviewing those labs, and then, like she said, asking those questions, because in particular in kidney disease, it's often very overlooked, and a lot of people really don't know unless they have some sort of maybe like history of like kidney injuries or something abnormal that
Mhm.
would bring it more to the forefront of the doctor's mind. It's very much often overlooked. And then all of a sudden, these clients, these people are in stage 3 and they're coming to us and they're upset. They're, why is this happening? Because it is very silent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that must be really tough to have
Yeah.
somebody in front of you that it sounds to me like they've almost been dismissed, and well, wait till we can put you on dialysis or medications or whatever, and they're in your office, and I can imagine that you could probably get some very emotional responses from those clients or patients that you're working with.
Yeah.
Now, Kathy, you mentioned creatinine, and you mentioned bun. Are there also other markers on the complete metabolic panel that would be markers that we should be looking for, or are those the two major ones?
Those are the, well, then you got your estimated GFR, like your filtration rate. That's one, but that sometimes like people panic with that because that can fluctuate depending on your hydration status. Um, there's so many things. I mean, because the kidney, the kidney's responsible for bone health as well, and a lot of people don't know that the kidneys are responsible for, producing blood cells like erythropoietin, which helps. So sometimes people be anemic. So there's so many things from your bones to um, your anemia management to hydration. There's so many things. But like I said, people that are at high risk, some people that are on long-term diuretics, something like Lasix, Bumix, any of these diuretics can affect the kidney because it's basically helping the heart, but it's drying out the kidney. And so when the kidney is not well hydrated, it doesn't function well. So a lot of people that have diuretics should be really looking at those numbers, making sure that their creatinine is not creeping up. People that are on long-term antibiotics, something like Bactrum's very tough on the kidneys. So there's people commonly that take lithium long term ends up with chronic kidney disease from lithium toxicity, and just some of the medications. And I always let people know, if you have any type of kidney disease, let the pharmacist know, so that when they go to fill a prescription, the pharmacist will already tell the pharmacist, oh, this patient has kidney disease. This is a red flag. They shouldn't be having this medicine. Because I can't tell you how many times people will get a medication and it needs to be renally dosed, meaning the dose needs to be reduced depending on the stage of the kidney disease, so that it doesn't further affect that kidney. So it's pretty complex when you think about it, all the things that you have to consider when you're managing someone with kidney disease.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cathy, you mentioned hydration. If somebody's dehydrated, that's going to impact the kidneys or the value on the complete metabolic panel. Can hydration alone prevent kidney disease, or is there more to it?
Oh no, sometimes people have chronic dehydration. They just don't drink enough and the kidneys just don't get it hydrated, and that can definitely impact kidney disease. And then there's sometimes even people that have that are on like antidepressants like SSRIs that can affect sodium and hydration. Those people can end up with kidney disease too, due to improper hydration. So there's just a number of things that we really look at: the medication list, the labs, and then we look at the physical appearance of the patient to see if they have any fluid retention. If you start retaining fluid in your lower extremities, in even in your abdomen, you start noticing that you have different. You're not producing a lot of urine, or if you're producing more than you're used to urine, if you're getting up frequently to urinate, are all signs that there could be something wrong with your kidneys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kaitlyn, are there any dietary choices that somebody can make in order to support their kidney health, in terms of either foods to include more astringent type foods or foods that they should avoid?
That's a really good question. And that's a lot of what we focus on when people come directly to our office. And that's always the golden question, right? Like, what can I eat to help my kidneys? What should I be doing? So there's a lot of changes that we tend to make in these people's diets. And when I say diet, I don't mean, like these fad diets that people talk about. I'm talking about just their eating patterns. And one of the things that is the big ticket item that we talk a lot about is sodium. So sodium in America, it's in a lot of the foods that we eat. And a lot of times cutting back on the sodium is one of the first steps. Luckily, there's a lot of newer, lower sodium or sodium-free options that we can encourage people to make the swaps like we talked about earlier with the modifications. That's part of it, just modifying from maybe a high sodium version to a lower sodium version may be enough in that instance to help bring your sodium levels down um, to where we're kind of looking for them to be. But on that note, one of the other things that we tend to look at is potassium. And when we talk about low sodium or sodium free, one of the things that we always educate on is to look at the label and make sure that there's not potassium chloride in your food instead of what is like sodium chloride, which is table salt. Because at the end of the day, if a food is shelf stable, they need to have some sort of preservative in there to make that food shelf stable. So if they're not using salt, they're not using sodium, they're going to use a different kind of salt. They're going to use potassium chloride. So sometimes when you see something that says salt free or sodium free, you think it might be a really good option for you, but it turns out that it's not. So that's one of the misconceptions that we always like to tackle right away because potassium is another one of the foods that we kind of want to limit. So there's sodium, there's potassium. Another one of the big ones is phosphorus. And that one is like one of those things that people don't really talk about in many other aspects of nutrition, or at least the people that we see, most people haven't heard of phosphorus. So when we're talking about high phosphorus foods and making low phosphorus swaps instead, that's one of the big things that we talk about. So we talk about limiting your dairy intake. We talk about switching from a whole grain product to like a white grain or like whole wheat pasta to just like your regular white pasta. And it sounds so counterintuitive because a lot of times people will come to us with their doctor having told them for years, oh, always choose like whole grains, because in the general sense, typically it is a better choice, but in the kidney sense, it's not always the better choice. So we look at that. And then one of the other big ticket items that we look at and we really play around with is protein intake. And that's really important because what can happen, and we kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier with the protein in the urine, is that if there's too much protein, what can happen is that it kind of pushes its way through the kidney, even though it's not really welcome there. And what happens is protein is such a big molecule that it ends up poking tiny little holes in the filters in your kidneys and damaging them. So we like to restrict protein. There's varying recommendations, or there are recommendations on how much protein someone with kidney disease should have, and it varies depending on, other comorbidities or what's really going on. All of these guidelines that we have, they're guidelines, they're not laws. So we have to really take into like we have to look at the whole person. So
Sure.
it depends. But generally speaking, when you're following a kidney-friendly diet, the protein intake is going to be a little bit lower. And a lot of times when you look up kidney-friendly diet or renal diet, you see that they say eliminate protein or like really, really reduce it. And in our practice, we found that that's not always successful because people end up tired. Protein's really important for your energy levels and maintaining your levels. And, you know, eliminating protein entirely is not really the answer. Reducing it down is very beneficial for the health. And one of the other things that people say is to switch from animal protein to plant protein. And some people will go vegetarian, they'll go vegan, and that can work if the person's educated on how to kind of structure a diet in that way. Or maybe they've been doing it for a long time and they are getting enough protein in. We find that a lot of times when they switch to a vegetarian or vegan diet, they're not always getting everything that they need, and they need some guidance to kind of help them do that. That being said, you don't have to switch to all plant-based protein, and I think that is one of the most common misconceptions that we see from people that have kind of done their own research, because it is very much pushed that, plant protein, it's the best, it's more gentle on your kidneys, and while that may be true, it's just not a good fit for every person. So that kind of goes back to looking at the individual, seeing what their lifestyle is like, what they're used to, and really going all the way full circle back to modifying the diet that they already have and making
Yeah.
it work. If someone's been like a real big meat and potatoes person their entire life, and then they get kidney disease, and we say, hey, you can't have protein, you can't have potassium. Meat and potatoes are protein and potassium. So it's kind of working with them to figure out, okay, how can we make this manageable? Maybe it's something like leaching potatoes of potassium. So that way we can remove some of the potassium or lowering the portion size, or picking protein in like smaller amounts more frequently, something along those lines. So they're still able to enjoy all the foods that they like, but manage their kidney health at the same time without feeling incredibly overwhelmed.
Yeah, absolutely. I love
Yeah.
that you are bringing so much emphasis on the individualization, because anybody can go on to the internet, right? We can look at whatever website and it's going to tell me I need to eat this way and this is the definitive way of eating it. But then tomorrow I could pull up another website and it could be completely opposite. And it's no wonder that there's so much nutrition noise out there that people get
Mhm.
confused on what is going to work for me. Kathy, I heard you wanting to interject when Kaitlyn was speaking. Is there
Yeah.
something that you wanted to
Yeah.
add, or was she
It
spot
makes
on?
me it makes me crazy. Everyone is out there, plant based diets, which I think have enormous benefits. But when someone has kidney disease and they switch from, to change from um, animal protein to plant protein, first of all, most likely they're not complementing proteins correctly. They're just eliminating protein from their diet and
Yeah.
eating salads. That's what they do. And so what will happen is that you're going to see people, the creatinine level is going to improve because creatinine level is a part of the meat. You'll see that, but that's not the bad thing. The bad thing is that people end up losing muscle mass, so they're burning their own. If the body wants protein, it's going to take it. So if you're not eating protein, your body's going to go get it from your muscle, which has higher nitrogen. It is even worse for the kidney. So
Hmm.
when you don't give your body the it's like a balance. Like you got to find that equilibrium there. That and it's so dependent on that person. I can't stress that enough. That not one uh, change is for everybody. You have to make that unique change for every single patient. So I have seen patients, they're in their 80s and they have lost 30 pounds. Yeah, you know what? Their creatinine levels have improved, but they're malnourished now. They're anemic. They have no quality of life.
Yeah.
Um, so when you look at a patient and you look at them as a 18-year-old, you know, muscle, someone with good muscle tone, uh, and you look at their needs versus an 85-year-old, say little woman that has a creatinine, let's say, of 1.5, and you look at an 18-year-old boy with a creatinine of 1.5. Those are two very different scenarios. The woman that has a creatinine of 1.5 could definitely be stage 3, even stage 4 kidney disease, where this young man probably doesn't even have kidney disease. So it's looking at their muscle ratio, because people forget to look at that. When you have a good muscle ratio, then that creatinine is a product also of muscle turnover. So I think
Hmm.
people forget that. The number has to be interpreted. So I think when people do plant-based protein, they're going to see an improvement in the creatinine, but it's not always beneficial. People lose weight, and I think normally the PCP will be like, yeah, you've lost weight, your creatinine is down, but these poor people are malnourished. That they trade one thing for another. They lack B vitamins. They end up with so many other problems that I don't think that it's worth changing. I think it's got to be definitely individualized for each patient.
Oh,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
100%. I always make the joke because I went vegetarian and then I was vegan for 8 years because that was the current push. This was back in, oh boy, the early 2000s. And there was a current push of, for those of us with polycystic ovarian syndrome, myself included here, to go vegan. And I was also working in a health food store in the middle of Indiana, which almost seems contradictory that I put those two together, but it was go vegan, it'll be better for you. And yeah, I lost a lot of weight. I lost like 80 pounds. And I mean, I remember the first time that I could slide my jeans off without unbuttoning them, and it was so great. But the adverse side that, or the opposite side that I was experiencing was I would get really dizzy just walking from my dorm room to the classroom. I had one instance where I passed out in the parking lot. What was I eating? I was having a baked potato with fake butter. I don't remember exactly what it was, and soy based sour cream. I almost said cream cheese. That would have been a whole nother conversation. But sour cream. And that was it. That was like what I was living off of all day long. And then in the evening, when I would go to the cafeteria, I would get a cheeseless. Basically, I got a cracker with tomato sauce on it, is really what I got. So all I did was swap out my animal proteins for more carbohydrates because I
yeah.
didn't know any better. There wasn't any education. It was like, just go plant based. Well, I'm like, well, okay, these are plants. There's no animal on it. Therefore, it must be right. And I ended up with a lot of nutrient deficiencies and ended up in the long run making my PCOS worse and having to make a comeback from it. So I want to kind of shift gears here. You also mentioned working with chronic disease states, hypertension being one of them. Can you tell me a little bit how that you see your chronic disease state clientele fitting in with your chronic kidney disease clientele? Is there an overlap? And what are the most prevalent conditions that could overlap the two?
I would
Yeah.
say probably number one is congestive heart failure. Number one, because the cardiologist is pushing that diuretic to get rid of the fluid that's around the heart. And
Mm-hmm.
there's always the nephrologist and the cardiologist. They're like they have like this little war going on.
Sure.
Protect the kidneys, protect the heart. Protect the kidneys, protect the heart. So it's
To the
like I said
war.
again, it's a balance. We have to find that there's a sweet balance there. That you don't go too heavy on that. You can go into acute renal failure, which means acutely your kidney got dehydrated, and hopefully they'll bring you to the hospital, give you some IVs, and slowly hydrate that kidney back. Doesn't always work, but that's solely from use of diuretics, and that's usually with congestive heart failure. So I'm going to say number one, probably congestive heart failure. Number two, uncontrolled diabetes, because that sugar is ruining it's ruining the kidney. That's like running, I tell people, it's like running maple syrup through your kidneys, and it's scratching up all those arterioles, um, damaging that kidney. So that would be number two. And then I think number three would be autoimmune diseases, IgA nephropathy. There's just some host of autoimmune diseases that affect the kidney. Lupus. It can go on and on. So
Sure.
that's why I think when you have a chronic disease, that's probably my passion, is trying to manage. You're not probably going to cure the chronic disease, but you're gonna stay ahead of it. You're gonna manage it. It's about, well, nobody says we're gonna cure that, but we're gonna stay ahead of this game and we're gonna manage this.
Mm-hmm.
So we prevent progression. That's the biggest thing. Is not to become hopeless when you get the diagnosis. It's become proactive and say, okay, I got this. I'm gonna stay ahead of this. We're gonna take this journey together. And I think that's so important, is that me and Kaitlyn are invested in our clients, and um, you know, we stay the distance with them. If they feel anxious, they can email us. If they forget something, I think it's important that we have that open line of communication. So yeah, it's about, it's about taking that journey together. What do you think, Kaitlyn?
I think you nailed it. I think sometimes I feel like a little cheerleader with our clients. Like I follow behind them, I'm just cheering them on the whole time. And sometimes, we give all the education, but the support is what's really kind of pushing people to do what they want to do and knowing they have someone that they could fall back on and always bounce questions off of. And I think that's really important. Um, in the sense of chronic diseases, I think that, the ones that you mentioned, definitely one and two for sure. But it's hard because there's so many chronic diseases. And a lot of times we do see an overlap. And that makes it even more complicated when we're trying to handle different restrictions from different diets to make sure that people feel satisfied and that they're enjoying the food that they're eating, because that's one of the most important things, if not the most important thing behind a person's health, is that they're enjoying food, because food is such an important part of all of our lives. It's not just something that you cook and you eat. There's the whole social component to it. There's so many different things that go into food. So keeping food something that people can enjoy is really a priority, regardless of the different chronic diseases that they have and how those may affect the diet. We really try to focus on making sure that people feel comfortable and have total control to make the right choices for their health in that aspect.
I think that is just absolutely beautiful. You put that choice back to that client or that patient that's sitting in front of you, that it isn't a dictatorship. And I know I've mentioned this in several of my other podcasts. It's almost mind blowing to my clientele when I give them four options and I say, which one resonates with you? What direction do you want to go? Oh, I've created this protocol for you. It's a roadmap, but we're going to pick one, maybe two things in here that we're going to work on. And they
Yeah.
look at me like, blink, blink, blink. You're not just going to tell me
Yeah.
what to
Yes.
do? I actually, which I thought was a huge honor. So I have a very strong referral source here in Washington State. And that provider actually became a client for me. And when I first saw her on my calendar, I was like, holy smokes. Oh, she's
So
checking
here.
on me. Like that was what were my mindset. I was like, oh, here we go. It's done. But I had to pull myself back out. I'm like, no, like, what is the problem? And yesterday I had a session with this individual and she said, just tell me what to do because I can't think. And I said, okay, so you're experiencing some brain fog. Are you sure? I said, because I don't normally just tell my clients what to do. I give you options because I want to empower you along this whole journey. And even in her eyes, she's a doctor, and she's like, "Whoa!" And I said, "What's going through your mind?" And she mentioned to me, she's like, "I've never once thought about giving my patient a choice in the matter."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, "You will get stronger buy-in if you give your patients the choice. However,
Yeah, absolutely.
that doesn't work for everyone." And if you're in
No.
a place mentally where you just can't, like I am so lost and I'm in the muck and the mire and there's so much noise and the nephrologist is telling me this and the cardiologist is telling me this and and now I've got you telling me this and I don't know what to do. So just tell me the first thing that we need to do. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's about having that flexibility to
Yeah.
be able to go in and out of expert coach. And when we can do that for our clients, wow, they feel so empowered. And they're going to tell somebody else, and they're going to tell somebody else. And, it's just, we're making a grassroots change to how our healthcare system is, you know?
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
the most rewarding is when they get up. What do you think? When they get up and they feel, you can almost see like that weight's been lifted off them.
Oh, yeah.
It's like somebody took that cement block off their head because before they got there, they were like fretting what was going to happen to them. Like, so Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so rewarding.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Um, Maybe one of you or both of you can teach a little bit. Let's branch out, right? Because so many people have an idea of what we need to do or what should be done, or I go to the doctor and I got these labs, and now here's another medication. In terms of lifestyle choices or quote unquote medicine, our sleep, our play, our movement, our food, is there anything that you would prioritize?
That's a really good question. Um, and I think that once again, it kind of boils down to the individual you're speaking to. And one of the things that I like to do when I'm talking to clients is ask them, which one of these is most important? Because of course, when we talk to them, we're always talking about food. That's definitely one of the pillars of health that we always touch on because they're coming to a dietitian or dietitian nutritionist. They want to talk about food or they want to kind of make some changes. So we're always going to talk about that. But you're right. It's health is so multifactorial. There's so many components that go into it. So I like to ask, hey, you know, sleep affects your health, exercise and movement affects your health, stress affects your health. Which one of these do you think you're in the place right now to tackle? How is your sleep? Is your sleep good? How do you move a lot? Do you have chronic pain? Are you able to move a lot? That's an option too sometimes. And taking all those things into account and then picking which one to work on because sometimes you're not always at the capacity to work on everything at once. And you have to pick which one is going to be what is your goal for this session? What is your goal until we meet again? What do you want to work on? And breaking it down to those nice little baby steps. So maybe someone wants to work on sleep and helping their sleeping habits because sleep is huge in health and it's a really important piece that a lot of people overlook and they'll have like bad sleeping habits. So instead of saying, okay, just like sleep more hours during the day, during the night, I mean, instead of saying
Oh, I
that, it's
agree.
like, right? Or during the day if you really need it.
Yeah.
But instead of just saying sleep more hours, now it's like, okay, well, why don't we create maybe like a bedtime routine? Why don't you have like certain steps that you do before you go to bed to help optimize your sleep? And things with that nature, maybe like putting down your screens, or a lot of people I find really like to journal or read a book or have something that's not a screen in front of their face right
Sure.
before they go to bed. And you know, but I do think that going back to your question, it really does depend on the individual. I think they're all very important. And I don't know that there's necessarily one that trumps the rest. I think it's dependent on someone's daily life, which one you can change and have the greatest effect from that. Because sometimes people have a really good exercise routine. They have really good, they've got their diet under control, but they're really stressed. They have like a really high stress job, or they're just not sleeping, and then tackling those things too. And that's something that we definitely try to prioritize and not just look at the food and the diet, is also to look at those things because, like you said, they're very, very important.
Yeah, exactly. I think being mindful. I think by identifying these things that the patient is able to identify that, oh wow, these things are out of balance. And I think that sometimes it just happens so slowly in their lives they didn't even realize it. And that we're just awakened in their sense to say they have to be more mindful of sleep, um, exercise, the way that they can improve without just going to use medication. Um, I think that's important because most people that we're seeing nowadays are tired of, polypharmacy. Um, they want to use interventions that are not medications. But I think by bringing this forefront in their minds, they're able to like make these decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, ladies, thank you so much. And as we get ready to wrap up, I'd like for each of you to leave the listeners with the top 5 foods that somebody could add in to their diet starting at their next grocery trip that would be kidney supportive. Maybe not reversing chronic kidney disease or anything like that, but anything that they could add that would be kidney supportive.
You ready,
That's a
Caitlin?
tough one. That's a
I
tough
got one.
one.
I have
The first
um
one going to my head,
this
I think we're going to say the same one. Is it
the Brazil nuts.
blueberries?
No, blueberries,
Oh,
good.
forgot Brazil nuts. That's a good one.
Brazil blueberries, super antioxidants. Number one, um, they help. They help clean up oxidative damage. Blueberries are terrific. They're low in potassium and phosphorus, so they're a number one food. But also, the number two would be just like two or three Brazil nuts, because they're loaded with selenium, and people with kidney disease usually have low selenium levels. So I think adding Brazil nuts, I always add that unless they have a nut allergy. Add Brazil nuts to their plan because it's preventative. What's number three? I would say,
It's
I
hard
think
because I find that one of the things that I always say instead of like picking out individual foods is to try and get as many colors as possible on your plate.
yes,
So beyond maybe going to your grocery store and trying to pick out like certain foods, of course, like Brazil nuts, they're very, very good for you. The blueberries, a lot of the berries in general are just great antioxidants. Um,
fish,
but fish
you
is
know,
really good.
fish omega threes.
But when
Yes,
you're going through the grocery store, one of the best things that you can do for both kidney health, but just overall health in general, is try to buy as many colors as possible. So when
yeah,
you're in that produce section, like maybe you're picking up strawberries and blueberries, and then you're picking up carrots, or you're picking up some, like lettuce of some sort, like a spinach or something like that. But regardless, having all those different colors, and then when you're building your plate, trying to incorporate a bunch of different colors is probably going to do you more good than having like a certain food, for example.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
We
yeah,
do
to
we do
come up,
encourage blueberries. Yes, we do encourage blueberries every
yeah,
day. Yeah, we do encourage them. Yes, we're blueberry fanatics, I think.
Love
yes,
it. Love
we
it.
love the blueberries. They're
Yes.
really awesome.
Is there a difference for you between the small wild and the larger, more standard ones that we see in the grocery store? Is there a difference for the kidneys, or whatever blueberry you can find, have at it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as long as obviously, you want a more organic blueberry, but it doesn't, just make sure they're not treated with chemicals. But most of them that you find are pretty okay. Yeah, and if you can't find fresh, you know, and we're big advocates of farmers markets. Go to the farmers markets because that's where you're going to find local is best. The local foods are great. Another thing that I advocate for is local honey. The local
Okay.
honey is great.
Yes, yeah,
But like I say, when people are using peppers, instead of using just the green pepper, use green, red, yellow, orange. Every single one of them have a different value. They offer a different antioxidant, phytonutrients. So they make different colors for a reason. This is what we try to stress to people. So when you look at that plate, you want to be looking like at the colors of the rainbow on that plate. And I think, the standard American diet, as we call it, the SAD diet, is usually if you think about it, a lot of people have like chicken, potatoes, corn, and that's a very tan
Mhm.
plate. There's no color there. So we're trying
Yeah.
to embrace color on the plate.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you, ladies. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you to schedule an appointment or to work with you, what is the best way to do that?
yeah. So they can either come to our website, which is www.collaborativekidneycare.com, or they could reach out to us via phone or email. So our office phone number is 508-989-0021, and that'll get you directly to Cathy. So
Yes.
she's the manager of the business phone. And then if you're not a phone person and you don't really like to talk on the phone, you could also send us an email at mail@collaborativekidneycare.com.
Excellent. And that will also be in the show notes for those of you who missed that or you happen to be driving. Please don't write and drive. We have enough issues as it is. And again, ladies, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I'd love to have you
Yes.
both back on again to talk about the other aspects of what you do, which is more along the digestive health. So, listeners, you can stay tuned because I know Kaitlyn has already volunteered herself on the guillotine once again. So, we'll get that scheduled as soon as we possibly can. But as always, listeners, make sure you are putting into your cup so that you can pour into others. If you're trying to pour from an empty cup, all you're pouring is dust and nobody's going to be happy. And take care of you, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Are you ready to embark on a journey towards a healthier, happier you? Welcome to the Neogenesis Nutrition Podcast, your ultimate guide to holistic wellness and transformative health. Our podcast isn't just another health show. It's your gateway to discovering the power of nutrition, the joy of balanced living, and the freedom of a body-positive mindset. Each episode is packed with expert interviews, practical tips, and inspiring stories that empower you to take charge of your well-being. Whether you're looking to boost your energy, overcome an eating disorder, or simply feel better in your own skin, we've got you covered. Ready to take the next step? Call us today at 253-507-5775 to schedule your initial consultation. Let's create a personalized plan that fits your unique needs and helps you achieve your health goals. Don't wait, your transformation begins now. Call 253-507-5775 or visit us on the World Wide Web at neogenesisnutrition.com to schedule your appointment. Neogenesis Nutrition Podcast, where your journey to a healthier life begins. Subscribe now and let's nourish your body and soul together.